Okay, let's get going. Thank you again for joining the App Engine Academy. Um, Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Don't worry, everyone. We will get into the platform just a little bit based on the survey responses. Everybody definitely prefers live building. We wanted to cover something a little bit different today because we're seeing a lot of confusion among customers and partners and people building custom applications about, how do all of the pieces fit together from, tables, dividing the users, granting the users the correct entitlements so it lines up with the licensing that you expect. And then how can we connect the users to data access to correctly set up their entitlements. So it's a little bit of a nuts and bolts session today, but like I said, we've seen a lot of confusion about this. So we just wanted to cover this in some detail, and we will hop in the platform and look at and see how we can use some out-of-the-box tables as examples for setting up entitlements for our users correctly. So, like I said, next week or next month, what we'll do is we will take a lot of these concepts and then start applying those when building a custom application. But today is a little bit of a refresh, and so let's get started. We always have safe harbor. This is everything that we're talking about, unless something possibly comes up in Q&A. Everything will be just current state, GA, and like I said, really we're talking about concepts around, how do we get custom tables to build applications? Like, how does that work? How do we understand, which of our users are doing what? And then most importantly, how can we configure the users groups, roles, and ACLs to correctly entitle them for the right amount of capabilities on the platform. So, a little bit of a refresh or a review for some folks, but there's a lot of detail here that we're seeing a lot of confusion about. So we thought it would be helpful to just cover in very specific detail about how to think about all of these different parts of understanding licensing and how it all fits together. Okay, so as always, a little housekeeping. This is just one of our many live on ServiceNow events, so there's lots of awesome events. I actually attend some of the other webinars to see what's happening with some of the other products, and so we would love for you to do the same. All of these are recorded as well, and so they are also available on the community site and on YouTube. So, Will, like I said, please just there's a lot of detail here. So if you have questions, there's some very specific things that we want to make sure everyone's clear on from a licensing perspective. And so, like I said, please add to the Q&A and we will get to them when they come in, if and possibly if it's and maybe we can bring you out off mute too if it's a more detailed question. But please use Q&A initially. So, like I said, what we're going to be doing is really drilling into not how to think about, what we've been focusing on is how you build an application. How to think about the platform capabilities, take business demand, and then build tailored business processes, workflows, and applications specific to your needs. And so we definitely want to in general cover that. But like I said, there's just been a lot of confusion about what does this mean from a licensing perspective. So how do we think about, utilizing the custom tables? How do we think about allocating the different users? And then, there's some nuances around, grandfathered custom tables that are also very confusing for everybody. So we're going to be going into very detailed discussion about all of this. We will get to the platform a little bit and apologize in advance if people are just want to see live building. We'll get back to that next session. But these are all this is just these concepts are just as important to know and understand when you're building an application to design it correctly to align with your license entitlements and not have a surprise at the end. So understanding this at a very granular level of detail is just as important as the other things that we've been talking about when actually building the application as well. All right. And so before we get started, though, we just wanted to announce we're swapping the second Wednesday of the month. So we have been holding an office hours where, it's just basically a live Q&A, and we may revisit that in the future, maybe after the holidays. But what we're going to do is we're going to swap that second Wednesday of the month and add another academy. And so this academy, the App Engine Academy, is going to be focused on traditional build tools, low code, maybe some JavaScript, and no code. So the Pro Dev Academy, we'd love to see you there if this is a good fit for you. But this is going to be where we're going to be exclusively focusing on advanced developer topics. And so initially, we're going to be talking a lot about IDE and Fluent. And the new really exciting build agent tool, right? So vibe coding has come to ServiceNow. It's really, really good. I'm very excited about it. And we'll be talking next week about how IDE and Fluent all fit together, how we might use build agent, and also, what's very exciting is with those tools, we now have the ability to create fully custom UIs, really with almost any third party UI framework. So we'll be focusing primarily on React. Before I moved to the ServiceNow platform. I was a React developer, so I'm really excited about this. So if you're interested in these topics, we would love to see you next Wednesday. But if you're focusing more on the traditional build tools, then we'd love to continue seeing you on the first Wednesday of the month. So that's available at the App Engine sign up page for on live at ServiceNow, and so please feel free to sign up there. We'd love to have you. Okay, so let's start with just discussing the table types, and this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but for our needs for when we're thinking about custom applications and then how users can access that information. It's really as simple as task extended tables, right? And that's the most important table on the platform, and one of our hero tables, where really anything that results in a business process should extend tasks. So all of our core product workflows, incident problem chains, all of the different case types in CSM, HR cases and COEs, all of those extend tasks. And so there's a couple of things that we'll want to talk about because there's a number of license implications when we're utilizing the task table. But basically, if work needs to be performed, if we're going to assign it to somebody, if we're looking for SLAs, approvals, any type of tracking, then we essentially, it's as simple as that. We always want to extend the task table, right? And so as we've over the last year or so, when we built custom applications that involve workflows, we've always extended the task table, and that's really because we want to access all of the core platform features um, that are listed here. And without extending the task table, you're not going to be able to use those features out of the box. So if any of those look interesting to you, and they really all should, then it requires you to extend the task table. So non-task extended table, that's essentially like a data lookup, right? This is reference data that in general is going to be utilized in the support of our business processes. So let's say we had a custom application where it's related to badging access, right? So the request for a new badge would be a task extended table because there's things that need to be accomplished and completed in service of that request. Maybe the different buildings, the different floors, rooms, and different types of security access, those would be non-task extended tables, right? Because that's just configuration that our requester might need to access to make the request, like a particular floor in room in a particular building. And so those non-task extended tables would be utilized and referenced by our task extended table, which is the access request. So this is sort of the premise around how all of the licensing works. And so we have talked about this before, but we just wanted to make sure to level set and ensure that everyone is clear about this difference. Okay, and so now that we think about those tables, let's think about users and where they fit into the platform. And part of this is a little bit of a review where, we think about all of our different products and how similar the custom applications we might build are in structure, right? In the different platform capabilities they're using, but the intent and the data model now is different. And so, we've seen this diagram before where we create this layered scaffolding where we have, this business process, how it's triggered, the workflow, right? The things that people need to do to service this request related to tasks and approvals, and then the automation. And so, when we think about our applications, it's basically a cycle of this business process trigger, and then the logic and routing that sequences the different assignments of things that people need to do, as well as all of our platform capabilities, right? Workflow data fabric, platform intelligence, traditional machine learning, where we're going to make a prediction, all of our Now Assist Gen AI capabilities where we're going to make an inference, all the different ways that we can extend the reach from our ServiceNow platform out to other systems in the enterprise, and then also introduce decision-making capabilities and machine learning and deep learning into these business processes to make them more valuable and more efficient. Um, let's see. So, Shane, if you would put your question in the Q&A, we just want to make sure we're getting the questions at the right time. So please add the Q&A here. Um, so but what we want to do now is think about, in the context of a custom application, where are we going to where are we going to understand the different type of users and licenses that are going to be participating in this application? And so that's what we want to be very clear on today, because the task extended tables and non-task extended tables, and then the users all need to be considered in combination, because that's how we get to our licensing entitlements, right? And so that's where we understand what licenses are required for this custom application. So there, a requester is essentially, they're going to be triggering this process. And so they might come in through the service portal, a conversational interface, mobile, email. And so they're the ones who need to realize value from the platform. So they need to trigger business process. They have a question. They need to find information. They need to realize some type of value, right, from the business processes that we've sequenced on the platform. And so a requester now, they have limited access. So they can view the process that says that they've initiated and update those requests. And so a requester does not require a license, right? And so this is one of the major advantages ServiceNow has over some other platforms, is we can engage our end users and they can realize value from the platform. They do not require a license, but they have the very thin slice. Their view is very narrow in the fact that they can only see the things that they are looking to accomplish on the platform, right? There are requests that they have made. Now, when we think about other license types and we start thinking about paid users on the platform, we can start with the business stakeholder, right? And so a business stakeholder now can view any of our tasks, any of these business processes. They can comment on them. But most importantly, they can approve different things that need to be accomplished on the platform. And so this is an important user, because what we can do now is introduce oversight and engage more users into the business process. But because their capabilities on the platform are limited, it's valuable from a cost perspective, right? So we can include multiple people in the business process that might not be assigned a task. So they might not have something to do specifically. They might just need to make an approval and view everything that is happening in this application. So we have the business stakeholder. And then finally, we have the fulfiller, right? And so the fulfiller, they basically are going to have full entitlements for this custom application. So they'll be able to access all of the different requests. They'll be able to create new ones. They can be assigned tasks. They can also make approvals. And so essentially, they will have full access to all of the data elements in this application. And so, what we really want you to do is understand this, because if you think about what our users, these different personas, are looking to accomplish in the context of the application, you can really use that to your advantage, right? If you correctly design the licensing structure, then one, you'll know what you need currently, but then also you can plan for the future, right? Because a lot of times requesters might have more extreme growth, right? Where we might have engaged a small amount of requesters, but now we open up the application to the enterprise. So we might have a huge jump in requesters where fulfillers and business stakeholders, their growth might be a lot more linear. And so we can understand how to plan for what we need currently from a licensing standpoint and what we need from a capacity standpoint going forward. So it's very important to understand these three types of users, right? And so let's look at kind of technically how this all works, because it can get confusing because we have the concept of an application in ServiceNow, but we don't license directly by application. Really, what we license more by is the level of data access that these different user types are going to have for the tables that are within the context of an application, right? So if we think about the badging request application, right, we have the different types of requests to request new access, to request the badge, to report a missing or stolen badge. And then we have those non-task extended tables that are going to support those requests, right? The different facility data, the buildings, the floors, the security level, all of the different rooms. And so the reason why we started with the different table types and then discussed the different user types is now we can think about how to configure the application to align it with their entitlements, right? So and this is very nuanced, but it's really important to understand what's happening here. So a requester, remember how in the previous slide I said they can access their own requests only, right? So if they are accessing a task extended table, they should only be able to read or write their own requests, right? Their own business processes that they've initiated. Now, what they can also do though is they have rights to access any non-task extended table. And so that would be like the buildings or floors, right? But in general, this isn't a precise statement, but in general, you can think about requesters to not being able to write to task extended tables. You'll see here there's a little bit of nuance here, where if a requester created a new record in a non-task extended table, they would technically have the ability to update it. But that scenario is rare. So in general, the way to think about requesters is they can create, view, and update workflows that they've initiated, and then they can read all of the different supporting data. And so that's important because if they're initiating this workflow through a record producer, what they can then do is they're creating a new task extended table, right? When they submit the request from the record producer. But now we can reference, the requester had the right to reference all of the different lookup data defined in the non-task extended tables that they might need to provide all of the information required to submit that new access request. Now, the fulfiller, they can access and write to any of the custom tables that are included in the application, right? So they can view what do they need to do today? What do their coworkers need to do today? From a group or department perspective, how many requests have we received? And then they can also manage and maintain, all of the non-task extended data that they need to support the configuration of this application. So the business stakeholder, again, this is there's essentially two primary use cases for business stakeholders. And one is a lot of times what we see is the manager of a requester might need to approve the request, right? So that manager probably doesn't need to be a fulfiller because they're not going to be assigned a task within this custom application. They're not going to need to view or I mean, edit these different tasks. So a business stakeholder is a great license for them because it's much more economical and they'll be able to approve any record and view any details of that record, right? So if one of the requesters is on their team, they would be able to view that request and approve it. What they can also do is, look at aggregated information to see what's happening holistically within this context of the application. And so this role used to be called an approver, but now it's called a business stakeholder. And the reason why is, this second point where we want to view and report off of all of the different workflows is a lot of times an executive or a manager needs to see what's happening in aggregate, right? View that in a dashboard or report, and sometimes drill into the detail. So that's another great use case where someone needs to have visibility into these processes as a whole, but they're not going to be assigned tasks themselves. And so another great use case for the business stakeholder. And there are some nuances here where different products add different capabilities for the stakeholder. And so another important part of the business stakeholder to understand is this is a platform-wide entitlement, right? So if you're a business stakeholder, not only will you have rights within the context of this custom application to approve and view records, but you will also across all the different products like ITSM, CSM, HRSD. And so you'll see here that the business stakeholder is entitled to a number of other things, but really what it boils down to is not only can they do the top two items, but they can also, update and view comments for on other task records as well. So, another capability for business stakeholders. And so this is really the three entitlements that you need to understand for a user persona perspective. And so how do we tie all this together, right? So we talked about the custom tables. And then we also talked about the different types of users. So when we are, when we're thinking about aligning the actual access, the level of access, right? Because we just looked at, let's just go back to this, where the way when we run an audit on the platform, the way we determine if these different users are requesters or fulfillers or stakeholders is the level of access that these users might have to the records in the table. And so this is sort of a very complex hierarchy related to the data model, right? But essentially, and there's a really good article here too that we have, a knowledge base article that describes this in even more detail. But essentially, the important thing to understand is we have a connection between our users and the entitlements on the access level on the table, and that is through the ACLs. And so when this application and the platform is audited, the connection or the pathway between the number of users to the types of table and record access, that is going to determine how we divide the um, the requesters, the fulfillers, and the business stakeholders. And so there's essentially three ways that we might find users and how they're connected to the ACLs that give them varying levels of access to the different tables, right? And so this one on the left, this is really what we prefer, right? So in general, it's a best practice to add a user to a group, and that group has different roles, and that's how we can connect the users that are in the group to different ACLs on the different tables. And so that's really what is considered a best practice. Another way that this is audited though is the pathway from a user directly to a role. So technically, you can add a user to a role This a lot of times is just sort of a shortcut. We see it a lot in subprod instances, but we really don't recommend that you utilize this relationship in production. So we definitely it's a best practice to use groups, but what we also have though is role inheritance, right? And so the ITIL role contains a number of different roles, and so it's just important to understand that even though you might not be adding a very specific role to a group, you still might create a connection between those users to that ACL through role inheritance. And so that's another way that when you're thinking about your number of users and how what your licensing disposition is looking like, that's another way that you need to count it. And so there's a lot of different ways to report on this within your own instance. And so I really like either sysuser GR member or sysuser has role. And so that's a really easy way to essentially get those counts and basically see what you're looking at now and start making forecasting as to what you might need in the future. So there are some knowledge base articles about how to set those list views up, but this is the relationship that you can utilize to start getting those filtering the different users and roles, and then you can group them, and that's how you can get all of the different counts. And so this can get pretty confusing, right? Because what we want is we want these different ACLs set up for the different users, the different user types, the requesters and the fulfillers. And we'll actually hop in the platform in just a second. But this is just some examples, and I took this directly from this knowledge base article, right? And so this is a great article to reference if you have any questions about how this might get set up. But this is a good example about how, see, if you look at the top four lines around fulfillers, right? So they can write to any case in this application. They can write to any lookup table. They don't have any limitations here. But if you go down to the requester and see how you see the table user restricted task right. It's about 10 down. See, there's starting to be what we call a personalization. And so what we're doing in this type of ACL now is checking to ensure this user has uh, only limited access to write to this task extended table. And that personalization is what moves them from a fulfiller to a requester. And so, when a compliance scan is run against your instance, these are the five steps that are performed. And so this can inform us a little bit more about how we might want to set up the ACLs. And so we have, does this table extend task, right? Is the ACL for reading or writing, right? Because if you remember, the requester can only read and write task extended table records that they are initiated. And we'll look in the platform in a second and see how we'll get that set up. And then, we have a number of different criteria. So, oh, so that's how we can understand, how the users now can be mapped to the table and how their level of access is going to help us understand the entitlements. Right. So now let's very quickly look at how do we actually get access to these custom tables, and then what does that mean from a entitlement standpoint related to task extended tables and non-task extended tables. So the primary way that you're going to get custom tables for an application is going to be through App Engine Fulfiller licenses, right? And so this is where your end user has an app, or your end users that are fulfillers have a license. And now you see here, they have access to unlimited applications and custom tables. So if we think about our requesters, they wouldn't need a license, right? So they now don't need a license for this application. And then our business stakeholder, that's a platform-wide license, right? So we now have our App Engine, or they have access to the App Engine tables that are in the context of this table. Now, here's a very important nuance, though, related to custom table allocations. And so this is something that there's a lot of confusion about. And when we think about our table allocation with our product workflows, right? So this example we have, we're thinking about ITSM. It comes with depending on the tier, it comes with either 25 or 50 tables. Now, the intent of these tables is that they would be non-task extended, and they are going to be configuration tables specific to your needs in support of existing ITIL processes. And so based on that, um, we have a nuance here that is defined in the custom table guide that limits what tables you can access in App Engine Starter, right? And so this is where a lot of people are confused, this is a very confusing part of the custom table allocation with, like, for in this example, ITSM, where because it's an App Engine Starter entitlement that we get as a table allocation with that existing product, direct task inherited tables are not included in the scope of that. So what that means is what you cannot do with your App Engine Starter table allocation, right, with this ITSM product, is you don't have the entitlement to directly extend the task table and create a net new workflow. And so that is defined in the custom table guide. And like I said, there's been a lot of confusion around that, but that's a very important distinction to understand. And the whole reason of that is, like I said, the table allocation was really designed for those non-task extended tables to support the existing workflows in that product. It wasn't really designed to build net new workflows. And so we just wanted to be very, very clear and call that out, because there's a lot of kind of misunderstanding and confusion about that. And then we'll talk about one more table type here, and then we'll finally hop into the platform and just look at how one of the out-of-the-box products configures the ACLs for requester, fulfiller, and business stakeholder access. So we also have, just to make sure it's really confusing, we have grandfathered custom tables, which was really designed for to provide for the case when a customer is switching from a older legacy SKU that entitled more custom rights than what one of the newer SKUs provided. And I definitely see the hands. We will go to questions in just a second just after we finish up this slide. So this grandfathered custom table, this is not a normal process, but a lot of times when you move from a legacy SKU to a more modern SKU, and those legacy SKUs had more relaxed table rights. What we do frequently is grandfather a number of those tables. And so what that means is tables that were created, right, their earliest creation date were created before the grandfathering event. Those tables are now considered grandfathered, and those don't consume a custom table allocation either from your App Engine fulfillers or from one of those out-of-the-box table allocations. So just wanted to make sure we touch on that very briefly. And let's look at questions. So thank you. I know that some of you have been waiting. So okay, well, let's hop into platform or the product workflows as an example, right? Because the exact same fulfiller, requester, and business process logic applies. And so what we can do now is just use these as an example. So what I'm doing here is I have filtered the ACLs on to the incident table. And so we just want to look at a couple of the different ACLs and see how this might help us understand exactly how we can set these up, right? So here we have a ACL for the incident table that allows right to to the table, and this is based on the ITIL role. And so this is obviously a fulfiller ACL, right? Because what we're doing is we're utilizing the product role to allow essentially unpersonalized rights to the incident table. And so, if we had a custom application, we would have a custom table, and then we would have a custom role, right? Obviously, we wouldn't use a product role, but this is a good example of understanding how to set up a ACL for a fulfiller on our application because we don't have a personalization. But conversely, if we look at a right ACL, where this is also for incident, but you can see we don't have a role here, but this now has been personalized, right? So if we can see if the caller is the current user, or if the record has been opened by the current user. And we have another filter here where, in ITSM, we don't want these records updated if it's closed. We can see that this is a requester ACL because we have to write, and now we've personalized it for the current user. And so if you think about setting up your ACLs for this user, then this can be the exact filter logic that you can use. Maybe you don't use this closed, but if it's a caller or open by, then they're the originator of this workflow, right? So then what we can also do is look at the read level of access for the incident table. And you see here that this again is set up for the ITIL role. So this is unpersonalized, and we can now all of our different fulfillers can read any record on the incident table. But if we see the one that is personalized for our requester, we can see here this one is this one's a little bit older, so there's more scripting. It could, we'd probably say it's better to set it up in one of these conditions here rather than just in script. But you can see here that it's checking the same thing, right? It's checking whether this user or this record has been opened by the current user, or whether it's been the caller is the current user. And so what occurs if a requester submits from a record producer and creates a task extended table, then both the open by and the caller are going to get set to the current user. So that this is now a personalized ACL where they can only view their own task records that they own, right? And so that aligns with the requester entitlement. And then finally here, you can see here that there's a read ACL for the incident table. And here we're using an approver script, right? So this is a script include that allows us to determine if approver should be able to read this record. And so that is another example of how we might set approvers up for read access. And so it can be difficult to understand, but definitely recommend that you just go back to one of the task extended tables for one of the product workflows and use that reference in ACL. And so what does this get us, right? So we talked about our task extended tables and our non-task extended tables, the different users and user types and where they fit into the business process, the level of access that those different user types has to our custom tables. We talked about the licensing and how we can get to those custom tables. And then finally, how we can set up all the different ACLs to actually, one, provide the right level of security and data access for our different user types, but then also prepare us for compliance conversations because now we're correctly aligning all of the different users with the different types of data access that they have. So thank you for hanging through this topic, and we will see you next month or next week at the ProDev Academy, and we'll be doing tons of building there. I can assure you about that. So appreciate it and have a good day.